Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Khalek for Breakthrough News, and this is Dispatches. In recent weeks, Israeli police and settlers have escalated the violence in the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood, Sheikh Jarrah, where Palestinian families are fighting efforts by Israeli settler groups backed by the courts to evict them and take over their homes. They've also attacked Palestinians praying at Al-Aqsa mosque during Ramadan, where we've seen wild and disturbing images of Israeli police storming the mosque, throwing stun grenades, firing rubber bullets and tear gas, and dishing out beatings to Palestinians during prayer. Hundreds of Palestinians have been arrested, injured, and hospitalized as they resist increasing Israeli brutality in Sheikh Jarrah and in and around Al Aqsa. And all of this is ahead of the Jerusalem Day March, when far right Israeli mobs are set to march through the streets of occupied East Jerusalem, chanting hateful anti Palestinian slogans to celebrate Israel's illegal capture of the city in 1967. These Israeli provocations have spurred worldwide condemnation and horror, with even Israel's allies expressing deep concerns about the mounting violence. So, to give us some insight into what's taking place in Jerusalem and why these tensions are escalating now, what the internal factors are driving it, I'm joined by Hadeel Shatara, the coordinator of Samidoun in occupied Palestine. She's coming to us from Ramallah. Thank you so much, Hadeel, for joining me.
Thank you for having me today.
So can you start off by talking about, or I guess explaining to our listeners and viewers what just took place on the day that we're recording this on Monday, May 10th, with regard to the Israeli police storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque? And can you also explain the importance of Al-Aqsa Mosque to Palestinians?
Welcome, everyone. What we're facing today as Palestinians started actually a couple of weeks ago. The invades and the occupation started invading the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the whole the Jerusalem city in general to prepare for this day. This day is an illegally alleged day for the settlers to come and invade the mosque itself, the Aqsa Mosque itself, where they celebrate, they party, they drink. And now, especially in the holy month of Ramadan, this year, they're trying to invade the mosque and preparing a huge number of settlers to enter. So they started invading last night. They started bombing inside the mosque where the people who were praying were inside of it. They also invaded Kubbat al-Sakhra, where all the female Muslims were praying as well, and they started throwing gas bombs, the high voices bombs. I don't know what you call them in English, so excuse my English.
The stun grenades. No, you're fine.
Yeah.
I think we call them stun grenades.
Yeah, so they started throwing all the grenades, using rubber bullets, live bullets, threatening people. They started dragging people outside of the mosque, using force, violence. So the whole field turned into actually a war field inside Jerusalem. People were left alone. No one was allowed to enter. They closed all the seven doors of Jerusalem, of the old city of Jerusalem. They started attacking people, taking them to jail. Many arrests happened in the past couple of days. Yesterday itself, more than 100 arrests happened in Al-Aqsa itself. So they started dragging kids, women, old men, the youth, without even acknowledging that these people are fasting and it's the holy month of Ramadan. What they're trying to send here is a political message that this city is going to be an Israeli city, according to them. What people are trying to do and to say that this is a Palestinian city, it's a holy city, and it has a meaning not only to Muslims in Palestine, but to Muslims worldwide. So the timing of the attack is actually harming all the Muslims around the world and is also harming the Arabs around the world because Jerusalem has always known to be Palestinian Arab city. So they started the invading this morning by entering a huge number of soldiers, and the attackers started throwing the grenades. They started dragging people out of the mosque, forbidding them from staying inside to pray, especially it's Laylat al-Qadr. So people are already there because of the holy month of Ramadan. This is the most special day in Ramadan to Muslims. So during this day, a lot of people actually spend the whole night praying inside the mosque. So the timing came with this event.
Mhm.
And a lot of settlers tried to enter, hundreds of settlers. They actually invited thousands to join. But while the Muslims were inside the mosque praying, and while the Palestinians were inside, they couldn't enter. So what they tried is to use the force, to send soldiers, and to send the military. So the military entered the mosque, and the mosque and the area around the mosque. It's 144 dunams, and started all the actions that you all have seen on the TV for the past few days. People were praying unarmed. They only had rocks. They only had their shoes. They only had chairs. They only had the food they were eating to throw to protect themselves from the grenades, from the bullets that they were attacking them with. So this is what they were trying to do this morning. So they were trying to invade with a huge number of soldiers and settlers. And actually, one of the settlers drove his car in right into a young man who was passing the street. So
Yeah.
with this violence, you cannot expect that what they're trying to do that has a religious meaning. It's only an attack to harm the Palestinians and to send a political message to the whole world that they're invading, that they're taking over this mosque, and they're finishing their Zionist project under it.
That's a very good explanation. And just to give people an idea, I mean, I'm sure anybody who's listening has probably seen these images. They've been all over the internet. But I'm just going to share my screen real quick to show what some of this has looked like. Hang on one second. Let's see. There's been so many videos coming out. I mean, this area looks like a war zone.
It
It looks
is a
like an
war zone.
actual, here's one image.
Yeah,
Let me make sure it's turned
inside
up.
the mosque.
This is what it looked like inside the mosque on May 10th, the Monday morning. Here we go.
So people inside the mosque actually started sending messages to the Palestinians and to the Arabs outside to come
I
and help.
mean, yeah, it's pretty
It's
it's
crazy.
pretty stunning. Let me remove that. It's pretty stunning to see those kinds of images, and of course, there was even worse images outside of the mosque,
True.
of the mosque compound. And this is, I mean, just to give people some background to this, there's been an ongoing growth in the Israeli like religious far right settler movement to try to
True.
take over the Al-Aqsa compound. Their idea is they want to demolish it. This is the third holiest site in Islam, very important to Palestinians and actually Muslims around the world, but has specific special importance to the Palestinian liberation movement nationally. And they want to demolish Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuild a third Jewish temple over it to try to bring about the end times. People who support this idea are in the Israeli government. And it's becoming more and more of a reality of this attempt to take over the Al-Aqsa Mosque with these provocations. And I mean, this is just the craziest provocation I've seen to date with this storming of the mosque by the Israeli police. From that, I guess I'd like to shift to the issue of that's been happening in parallel to this, which is the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, which has also been getting a lot of attention over the past week. But there's been many Israeli provocations over the last 3 weeks or so. This is a neighborhood in occupied East Jerusalem that houses, several Palestinian families, many of whom fled from, the 1948 Nakba, the ethnic cleansing of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to create the state of Israel. And they're now being faced with these lawsuits to try to get them evicted by these settler organizations, and they've been resisting this. So can you explain to us can you explain to our viewers and listeners what's taking place in Sheikh Jarrah? Why has this
What's
neighborhood become
happening?
such a focal point for the Palestinian cause in recent weeks? Go ahead.
This place is a focal point to Palestinians because we're not only talking about taking over the houses, we're talking about 500 Palestinians being oppressed and being forced to leave their houses. It's a second Nakba. It's a continuing Nakba, actually, not a second Nakba. We're talking about 808 dunams of Jerusalem, and we're talking about an area that is connecting all the Arab neighborhoods in Jerusalem. So when you confiscate and you take Sheikh Jarrah, you cut all the connection between all the Arab areas in Jerusalem. And you won't have any road left for Palestinians to reach their families, to reach their Arab community anymore. We're talking about Al-Kurd family, Al-Qasim family, Al-Jaouni family, and the Skafi family. 4 families being invaded and forced to leave their houses. So we're talking about a focal area in right in the middle of Jerusalem that is connecting the old city, that is connecting the Ras Al Amud, At-Tur, and all the other areas surrounding it. And when this starts, this case has actually been in the courthouse, in settlers' courthouse, in Zionist court for the past 49 years. So it's not a new case. But what's happening now, once they start invading these families and forcing them to leave, then other families will follow. So it's not only about these 4 families, it's what's after. This is the Zionist project for Jerusalem to invade all the Arab population. It's an ethnic cleansing for all the Palestinian existence from Sheikh in Jerusalem itself. And because of the importance of Jerusalem to the Palestinian cause, this project must be stopped. And now everyone is paying attention to what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah. And it's a great chance to protect the neighborhood, to protect Palestinians from being protect the houses from being demolished, to initiate new Zionist organizations that is cutting all the connection between the Palestinians. And as you saw, the Zionist settlers are violent and are trying their best to vanquish the existing of Palestinians. So it's going to be dangerous for all Jerusalem, not only this neighborhood itself. I can't hear your voice.
Sorry about that. I just want to show to those who are watching and listening the kinds of people that you're talking about, the sort of Israeli Jewish settlers that are that they're trying to replace these Palestinian families with. And this video has been making the rounds I think this was a couple weeks ago. But it was pretty shocking just because this is an American you're going to see. This is an American guy. Let me go back here. Who's basically, just to give everybody a backdrop to this, he is arguing, he's a settler who's taken over property that belongs to a Palestinian resident in Sheikh Jarrah. And he's basically like kind of trolling her. But here's what he had to say. And I want you to listen to his accent because he's very much American. So here we go. So that's just to give, I think you've probably seen that video. It's pretty stunning because that guy is very much American. So what's happening here is that some of these people aren't even in Israel proper. They're like in the US or from other parts of the world, and they're coming into Jerusalem and stealing Palestinian homes. But I guess this is kind of just an ongoing Nakba for Palestinians. This is the ongoing reality all across the West Bank. It's been happening in East Jerusalem. So I guess as somebody who you're in Ramallah right now in the West Bank, and it's not far. I mean, if you were to travel by car without any checkpoints, how long would it take to get to East Jerusalem?
Without any checkpoints?
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. That's like nothing. That's like going from Northern Virginia to Washington, D.C. for the Americans who are watching. But of course, you can't even go there. You can't even go to Sheikh Jarrah to show solidarity if you want to.
No, because what the Zionist project focused on is dividing the Palestinians into what we call ghetto system. So it's like the people who are living in the West Bank and Gaza are holding green IDs, and even if you're living in the West Bank and Gaza, you can't even see each other. Even if you're holding the same ID, you cannot visit each other. You cannot go to Gaza Strip. Gaza people from Gaza cannot come to West Bank. So, and people living in Jerusalem are holding a special kind of ID that is saying that your nationality is hidden because you're Arab living in Jerusalem. So they have a special ID. And then there are the people who are the Palestinians who are living in the occupied lands in 1948 who are holding Israeli IDs. So, and of course, we're talking about the people in the diaspora who are not even allowed to enter Palestine. So they divided all the Palestinians, and now we're living 20 minutes away, literally 20 minutes away from Jerusalem, and we cannot even pass the checkpoints. We're facing Kalandia checkpoints, Na'lim checkpoints, and Midya, and wherever you turn your face here in the West Bank, you're gonna face a checkpoint. Wherever you turn your face here, you're gonna see a gate that is leading to a settlement. So even in the West Bank itself, there are many places that you cannot reach. It takes you 3 hours to get to Jenin. It's right in the north of West Bank. It takes you 3 hours due to checkpoints.
That's
Normally,
crazy.
it should take you 30 to 40 minutes. So they're dividing all the areas, all the places. They're dividing the villages from the main cities. It takes 35 minutes exactly to close to have a full closure for the whole West Bank. And
Jeez.
no villages can actually go to visit each other or can pass. You cannot pass by any village if they close down. So we're living in Ramallah, and we cannot even pass or go to Jerusalem due to the checkpoint. And if you're an activist, then you're dreaming of getting the chance to visit, especially in Ramadan or in the official holidays. So yes, we cannot reach it
And then of
in any
course,
other
Israeli Jews can travel freely, in their as quickly as they want from one place to another, um,
everywhere.
which is why they call it a
Even the
system of
main roads are
apartheid.
theirs. They're controlling the main roads. We have to go through a lot of bypass roads within the areas that we're living in. The main roads are being controlled by the Zionist settlers and the
Wow.
Zionist occupation.
So going back to the issue of like this ongoing, I guess, campaign of ethnic cleansing, essentially, um, going back to Sheikh Jarrah, where are the people who are living there now from originally?
Some of them came from Jaffa, some of them are originally from Jerusalem and just moved from one area in Jerusalem, from the west areas, some of them to the east area with what happened in the Nakba and after the Nakba in 1967. So in the Aqsa, so most of them come from the land of the occupied land in 1948, and some of them comes from West Jerusalem, but they're all originally Palestinians
And just
from
to
the area.
speak to another example of, the segregationist laws that exist in Israel, under Israeli law, Jews who can prove a title from 1948 can claim back their Jerusalem properties, while the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who were displaced in the same conflict, the same Nakba, there's no similar law that exists for them. Obviously, we all know Palestinians have been blocked from returning to anywhere they've been pushed out of, whether it's been in 1948, 1967, or thereafter. So I guess I want to move from here to talk about an interesting aspect of this whole situation that's been quite inspiring, I think, which is the involvement of Palestinians in protest against what's taking place in occupied East Jerusalem. It's not just happening there. There's been,
Yeah.
yes, protests that we've all seen on video and people resisting in occupied East Jerusalem, but there's also been Palestinians in the West Bank, Palestinians in Gaza. Recently, were marching near the border in solidarity with people in Sheikh Jarrah and those that were fighting attempts by the Israelis to take over Al-Aqsa mosque. Um, Palestinians in Lebanon have been holding solidarity rallies as well.
Yes.
This hasn't happened in a very long time. Israel, I think, has done a very sophisticated job in trying to split Palestinians up by where they live. So what happens in Gaza stays in Gaza. What happens in the West Bank stays there. But in this case, even Palestinians in 1948 Palestine, those who have Israeli citizenship, have also been holding solidarity rallies, and in some cases, have been going to East Jerusalem to protest in solidarity with those living there, which doesn't typically happen. So, can you talk a little bit about how this has really seemed to unite, maybe I wouldn't say Palestinian political factions, but people on the ground across Palestine and even the broader region?
People on the ground are reaching, or Palestinians around the world. We're 14 million Palestinians around the world, and when you're talking about Jerusalem, and when you see the videos and the pictures, everything in you moves actually. So Palestinians, it's one cause. We're living under the same occupation, whether you're living in Palestine or you're living in Lebanon. You've been you've been living in refugee hell camps in Lebanon. So when it comes to ongoing Nakba and to see what's happening right now, this has moved all the Palestinians around. Yes, it hasn't happened for a long time because of the economic burden that was added to on people's back due to the living conditions that they're trying to force on people. But we have reached a point where we lost hope in all the international official campaigns and international law and everything that they were trying to do, claiming that they're helping us. We have lost hope in the 30-year path of negotiations. Since Madrid in 1991, Madrid conference, the Palestinian cause has took another path. It took the negotiation path, the peace path, peace for prosperity path, and this has brought us nothing but more refugees, more ethnic cleansing, more ghetto societies within the Palestinians. And we started to realizing that this cannot continue to happen, and we need to take the lead back by ourselves. That's why people in Haifa, in Nazareth, Gaza, Ramallah, Jenin, in Lebanon, Badawi, Burj al Barajne, Ain al Hilwa, in Berlin, in Madrid, in Sweden, in Stockholm. Palestinians everywhere are moving today. What we've seen in Berlin yesterday, 4 arrests actually. The German police arrested 4 Palestinians because they were defending Jerusalem and they were protesting in the street. So what you're seeing here is Jerusalem has moved every Palestinian everywhere. And of course, Jordan, the refugee camps in Jordan have been in the streets for the past week. So this is important. This is a message from the Palestinians saying that resistance is the only solution. Us being in the street is the only solution to gain our rights back.
That well, very, very well said. And from that, I guess my question would be well, first of all, before I go to this, because I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the internal dynamics of Palestinian politics right now. But first, you are in the West Bank at the moment, and all of the cameras have been on East Jerusalem. But there's actually been some Israeli provocative violence in the West Bank. There was a 60-year-old woman who was basically executed on camera by the Israeli occupation forces a couple of weeks ago. And there's also been, I believe, from what I've been reading, and you can tell me what's happening on the ground, they've been sending more units of Israeli soldiers to go and basically control and police the West Bank to stop people from protesting or trying to get to Jerusalem. So can you tell us what's happening on the ground on the West Bank? Is it the same? Are things escalating there between? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
What's happening in the West? People are moving, things are escalating, and they're trying to control the security by actually they're having secret talks with the BA to control the whole situation, to control the movements. But people have had it. Mm-hmm. They're trying to move. They're killing people in the streets. They're closing all the checkpoints every single day. So the checkpoints has been held for the past couple of weeks. They're checking all the cars. They're asking for IDs. We have a lot of attacks every single day. They're trying to confiscate more lands for the settlements. If you look at Nablus in these days and you look at Beit Dajan, they're trying to confiscate many dunums of lands. The number of arrests has been increasing massively for the past period. So what's happening in the West Bank is connected to what's happening in Jerusalem. And the increasing violence is actually affecting all the areas. What they're doing around Gaza, what they're doing on the borders of Gaza is actually scary. So they're trying to scare people. They're trying to use violence to stop people from moving. But what they're being surprised of is that Palestinians are not stopping. They're not. This time it's different. People are in the streets after what happens with the election game and postponing the election allegedly because of Jerusalem, which is, we know it's not true. We know what the BA is trying to do because they're losing control. And we all know that the BA has really strong ties and they have the security arrangements with the Zionist side. And they're losing control. That's why this is happening here, and BA is playing a very bad role. They're keeping silent. They're actually helping the occupation and arresting Palestinians, and they're trying to control the reaction of people about what's happening.
So yeah, that's actually what I wanted to ask you about next, is the fact that there was this postponement of the Palestinian elections by the PA, or Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, which they blamed on Israel's refusal to let a vote be held in East Jerusalem. So can you talk a little bit more about the internal political divisions? Because oftentimes, I mean, people don't realize, obviously, Palestinians aren't like all one and the same voice like any other society. There's different political factions. You have Hamas in charge in Gaza. You have the Palestinian Authority, which you mentioned collaborates with the Israelis to enforce the occupation in the West Bank. And how is that like? So what are the political divisions now? Why were these elections actually postponed? You kind of alluded to that, right? Because the Palestinian Authority is losing support. But also, there was, if I'm not mistaken, there was some people in East Jerusalem who were maybe chanting some Hamas slogans, and other people got a little upset because they don't want to be associated with Hamas. So there's these internal political divisions. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Well, it's normal for any society to have a lot of political divisions, and we're living in Palestine, the oldest case in the whole world, the oldest cause in the whole world.
Right.
So what's happening is that the political parties has decided by themselves, without returning back to people and asking people what they want, that they want to have elections because of the lack of aid and support from the American and the West governments in general. So the real reason behind the BA and Hamas act toward the elections is not to end the division, is not toward what's best for the Palestinians these days, because 8 million Palestinians are not even allowed to vote in the 48 lands, in the refugee camps, and in the diaspora. So you're cutting the Palestinians into two halves. You're only allowing Palestinians in West Bank and Gaza to vote, and to choose a government that only plays a role in the everyday life as the occupation wants it to be. So these elections were postponed for real because of the BA are losing against Hamas. The BA is divided. Fatah is divided. They had 3 lists in the elections. They were divided into 3 parts, so they weren't gonna win. And this is not the conditions that they agreed with with the Americans and the West governments. So this election was postponed because of what's best for Fatah, not what's best for Palestinians, because they didn't even ask the Palestinians in the first place what they want. If you look at the conditions right now, the elections is not a popular request by the people.
Right.
The situation is much, much harder than going to elections. Elections won't solve anything.
Well, especially when like these people actually don't have any real power. Like Israel's still in charge of all these territories anyways, whether it's Gaza too. Israel controls all the borders. But that said, how is the Palestinian leadership, which is basically just kind of a bunch of dinosaurs at this point who have failed to deliver, but how are they reacting to this uprising? I guess I would call it an uprising of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. And I guess I know you're not in East Jerusalem, but what's the sense of how Palestinians in East Jerusalem feel about, like, do they care what the PA or Hamas have to say about what's happening in East Jerusalem?
No, not really. They only care about the military branch of Hamas because people want to fight. People want to resist. They don't care about what the officials and the political representatives of Hamas and Fatah are saying. This is not what's taking place on the ground. People are going out to the streets by themselves without any motives from the parties.
Mhm.
They actually don't want to see any flag of any party in any of the protests. They only want to see the Palestinian flag everywhere. So the youth movement on the ground is actually taking control of the demonstrations, because we have had it with all the political parties. We have had it with Fatah. We have had it with Hamas. They've been only selling. Fatah has only been selling the lands to the occupation. They're only been collaborating. They're allies with the occupation. So this is how we view them today as leaders of the political organizations. The divisions are normal. Fatah actually shocked all the other parties and the other uh, elections slates who were participating in the elections with the with postponing the elections. So the reaction is actually very angry about what's
Mm,
happening, because they want the best, what's the best for themselves, not
right.
what's the best for Palestinians. And people actually in the street don't care about what all the officials are trying to say right now.
I have like a more, I guess, I want your personal opinion on this as a Palestinian who's watching this play out. I don't know how much you care about, what people are saying on Twitter, but how do you react to these to these claims on Twitter by like people who are pro-Israel and they want to say this isn't Zionism, like this is something else that's happening. Like we don't support these settlers in Jerusalem. This is not the Zionism I support. How do you react to people who say that?
Zionism is Zionism. There is no bright face of Zionism, and there are no Zionists that are less Zionist than other Zionists, if you can put it this way. They're Zionists.
I like.
They're in some people's else's land.
Mhm.
So they're trying to move this fight from a political fight to a religious fight.
Yeah.
So these people, what they're trying to say is actually dangerous, because they're trying to make it a religious fight. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, you just
Okay. So
cut
what
off
they're
for a
trying to
second.
do
Yeah.
is to oh, so what they're trying to do is to transfer a political fight into a religious fight, and this is not the case here. It's
Mhm.
people who came and took over our land, who are practicing ethnic cleansing to all the Palestinian existence on our own land. So this is the
Right.
case, and this is the cause.
And I want to also get your reaction to this. And again, I don't know if you've been following, if you care about the Western media coverage or have been following it, but to our American audience, this has been a very frustrating element of watching this play out, as it always is. I'm going to share my screen real quick and just show you. I mean, these are the kinds of headlines we're seeing in the US, right? You have Israelis, the Israeli settlers and soldiers blatantly and openly attacking Palestinians with all kinds of weapons. And I mean, the most Palestinians can respond with really is throwing rocks at most. But here's the way it gets covered, right? Is it's always clashes. So
Clashes.
Israeli police clashed with Palestinians, right? That's CNN. You have Palestinian and Israeli police clash in Jerusalem over, and I love this, over planned Arab evictions. Like, I love the word
Wow.
evictions, replacing what's actually happening, which is ethnic cleansing. And then, of course, BBC, Jerusalem clashes. Um, and then, Israeli police, Palestinians clash at Jerusalem Al-Aqsa. That's Reuters. So, I mean, this isn't new, right? And whenever there's
No.
conflicts that erupt, we always see the same reaction from the Western media that's very much biased in favor of Israel, whether it's Gaza being bombed, or whether in this case it's one of the holiest sites in Islam being stormed by the Israelis. But how do you respond to that sort of blatant propaganda?
I think the pictures and the videos that are coming from Jerusalem are the best answer now to all these claims. It shows the fully dressed soldiers with bombs and guns and everything, where Palestinians are holding their books and doing their homework, the Palestinian children doing their homeworks on Al-Aqsa mosque. So the best answer to this is look at the pictures. We have never expected anything from the Western official media, or they have been like this since ever. They're pro-Israelis. They've been supporting this ethnic cleansing. They've been supporting the Zionist movement around the world. So the best answer to this is our land. We're going to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea because it's ours. And Palestinians all around the world will return to their lands. This is the best answer to them. You cannot force a Western media to turn their faces and to look and actually smell the truth. They're not only doing this to Palestine, doing this to every single struggle around the world. They're the reason behind many of the struggles that are happening around the world.
Right. And from that, I guess I want to bring it out a little bit more internationally. I think that this is interesting that this is happening after all of these normalization deals between the Israelis and the UAE, and Saudi Arabia and Israel are already basically allied, but they're not openly allied. But there's been talks about a normalization there, Bahrain and the Israelis. So I guess what do you think this says about, because what we've been hearing with these normalization deals is, oh, if we just normalize ties with Israel, everything will be better. But guess what? It's not. Like, so what do you have to, what's your response to this idea that if Arab states just, normalize relations with Israel, then things can be better for Palestinians?
Here we have to tell the difference between the Arab regimes and the Arab people.
Of course.
Because all the Arab people are against what their governments are doing. And we know how these regimes are acting in their own countries, how they're arresting people for expressing their opinions, and how they're acting. Well, guess what? This is what's happening. This is the response from Palestine to all the regimes that are normalizing with the occupation. Because there's no better response than going out to the streets and showing them the real picture. There's no peace coming from this normalization. It's only an economic deal to benefit from the technology and to benefit from the finance. So what they're trying to do here is an economic project, not a peace project or what they want to call it.
Also, it's really weird to call it a peace deal between two countries who have never been at war.
Exactly.
Like the idea. But do you think this, there also is something happening that I haven't seen happen before, which is, and I don't know if this means anything, it's really just rhetoric and words, but you do see a lot of words of condemnation, or as the EU and the US always say, deep concern about what Israel's doing, but they've been a little bit more forceful with their words. They seem kind of shocked because what Israel's doing seems a bit more extreme than usual, and in a sense of like they just want to. It's almost like they just want a war for the sake of having a war. But you also have. Go ahead.
They're actually pushing for a war in the 48 lands and in Jerusalem. They're not trying to push for a war with Gaza or in the West Bank. This is part of the division plan that they're trying to do. And the deep concerns are the usual statement of UN, the EU, the American government. But what's happening today is that they cannot defend what they're saying.
Yeah.
So that's why they might be expressing more. But actually, people here don't care what they think, whether it's deep concern, whether they're trying to move or do anything, because we know liberation won't come from these people.
Right. And also, they're also funding the Israelis. Like, if you really have deep concerns, then maybe stop giving Israel $3.8 billion a year in military aid. That's a good place to start.
Stop buying the weapons that are being tried on Palestinians.
Right, are being tested on Palestinians in so many ways. While I have you, I also want to ask you about the issue of COVID. Obviously, that's had a pretty devastating impact, more so on Palestinians and Israelis. We've had this situation where Israel's not even taking responsibility for vaccinating. I don't know if you've had any access to vaccines whatsoever. Meanwhile, the international press has been praising Israel for vaccinating like a significant proportion of its population.
95%.
So can you explain some of like the different, this plays into Israeli apartheid. Can you explain some of the differences between what you've had to face as a Palestinian in the West Bank versus what Israelis have had to deal with in terms of COVID?
Okay, in terms of COVID, the division has actually showed actually flew on the ground. What we have been facing is that the prisoners inside the Zionist jails faced the most horrible conditions. They've actually took the cleaning materials from the prisons
Wow.
Yes, they confessed. They took a lot of um, uh, nutrition materials that the prisoners need inside the prisons, and the cleaning materials. So what they were facing is they are the first line of resistance. Our prisoners. We have 4,400 prisoners now in Zionist jails, and they were the front line of all the confrontation and all the resistance for Palestinians. So they faced the Israeli acts directly due to COVID, and they actually tried to spread the disease, the spread the virus among the prisoners. Yes, by sending sick people, sick jailers to talk to the prisoners and to be with
Wow.
them inside the jails.
So they tried
Yes,
to use COVID as a weapon?
yes, COVID was used as a weapon. COVID is being used as a weapon here by
Wow.
the Zionist occupation. Yes, and if you look at the BA has demanded a country, a full state in 2012. 12% of Palestine, of course. They couldn't take control. They couldn't protect people economically. They couldn't protect people socially. They couldn't do anything. The closure, when they closed the borders and when they closed the checkpoints that affect all the West Bank and all Gaza, so a lot of materials could not reach. We did not have any reach to the materials, and if we want to get the vaccines, it has to go through either Haifa, which is controlled by the Zionists, or here through Jordan. If they're bringing it through Jordan, then it has to go through checkpoints as well.
Yeah.
So even getting the vaccine itself has to go through checkpoints
Wow. Have you
and
had
has
any
to go
access?
through.
Have you had any access to
We have had
vaccines?
access because the World Health Organization has managed to provide some, but still 90% of the population here in the West Bank and Gaza has not reached any vaccination or anything.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Um, I want to move a little bit over to the idea. A lot of people have been raising the prospect of this is going to turn into a third intifada. Do you think that's wishful thinking? Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? Where do you think this will lead?
This is a hope for Palestinians
Yeah.
because all the other practices have failed us as Palestinians here, and has made our life a living hell. Actually, they're controlling every single aspect of our lives, even the air. So people are really hoping for this, but we don't have any trust with the BA and the roles that the BA is going to be playing in the next period that is going to cut any uprising, that is going to turn down any flame for a third intifada. But people are also are actually screaming in the street against the BA itself, because now it's very clear what the practices that they're taking, and the motives for people now are very strong to have a third intifada. So we hope for a third intifada, but we don't guarantee that it's going to happen. It depends on what's going to be happening politically, because it doesn't only depend on being on the streets, it also depends on a political side. And this is lost as Palestinians because we don't have a real leader that wants to liberate Palestine at this period.
Do you think that it's like more likely to come out of 48 Palestine or come out of East Jerusalem because there's just not as much of a mechanism of control the way there is in like the West Bank in Gaza?
It would most probably come actually from the 48 lands, because people are moving. People in Yafa are facing the same thing that people in Sheikh Jarrah are facing today. They're trying to kick people out of their houses in the old city of Yafa.
Wow.
So this has been people have been taking action in the street for the past few days in Yafa itself. So when you're facing this ethnic cleansing, when you're facing that our houses are being demolished, I think the flame would come from the 48 lands this time.
And do you think that, witnessing the Israeli side of things, do you think that Israel's moved towards a more extreme direction? And before you answer that question, I do just want to show this guy who's been getting a lot of attention. He is an Israeli politician who is supported by Netanyahu, Itamar Ben Gvir. And today, after you had mentioned that there was a Israeli settler who had ran his car into Palestinians around the Al-Aqsa mosque, and there's video of it. And so this guy retweeted the video and said, This is obviously the English translation, but he said, "We have lost sovereignty in Jerusalem. It's time to liberate the Temple Mount and Jerusalem and show them who owns the house once and for all." And as I mentioned earlier, this is part of the Temple Mount movement to demolish Al-Aqsa. I mean, this is like really fanatical, like Jewish Taliban kind of stuff, to want to rebuild a third Jewish temple for the sake of bringing about like the end times. It's insane. It's very Messianic. It's very ISIS-like. And here's the video he was praising. I just want to play it real quick so people can see what this guy was openly advocating for. There's the Israeli settler just like hitting into Palestinians. And then, of course, and this guy is just openly saying, he's openly celebrating it as showing, he's openly celebrating it as, as regaining Jewish sovereignty over Jerusalem. So the reason I show that is I guess I want your take as a Palestinian on this. Obviously, you're not in Israeli society, but there does seem to be a lurch towards the religious extreme right, where these people are fanatic. I mean, Zionism is Zionism, as you said, but this is like the religious Zionism, the really fanatical side of it. So how do you even experience that in your daily life at all? I don't know if do you see settlers that often?
Yes, because I'm living in the West Bank. 700,000 settlers are in the West Bank.
Right.
We're surrounded by settlements.
And they have this ideology, this mentality.
They have this ideology. This is the mentality. This is the people that actually they're bringing here. These are the settlers who they're bringing to Jerusalem and to the West Bank. This is the ideology that they're bringing to the land.
Jesus.
So they're trying to transform the cause from a political cause into a religious cause. And this is the danger of it. This is what Zionism is trying to do now on the real ground. And he's boasting this. And the police actually protected the settler. They took him out of his car and they took him to the ambulance. And the kid was right there.
The kid who got hit. The kid who got hit by the car. Yeah.
Yes. This is the ideology that they're trying to. If you look at the elections, the occupation elections, the 3 times elections, if you look at the right wing, there is a growing right wing.
Yeah.
And this is dangerous. And this is being supported by the US and being supported by all the the Western governments, by the EU and other governments. And this is dangerous, actually. They're trying to transform it to a radical right fight.
And I'm curious, like, I'm curious if what you have to say about this. I've always been almost fascinated by the idea that there's a lot of these Israeli Jews, especially on the far right, not all of them, but there's a number of them who look Arab because they actually are from like Arab country. I mean, their parents or grandparents probably are like from Iraq and Morocco. And it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad to see that, because there's this element of Zionism that doesn't really get talked about, where it didn't just break up Palestine, it broke up the region.
Yes.
Like it really, Zionism like removed, I mean, there's like Jewish communities that existed in Baghdad, for example, for a long, long time, and they're not there anymore. And now some of their descendants are like the far right religious people in Jerusalem. And I'm curious your thoughts about that.
Well, this is part of the game that they were trying to play. This is part of the division that they were trying to put in all the Middle East.
Right.
To bring people that are acceptable. They look like you. They were Jews, but now they're Zionists.
Yeah.
This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to mix this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the misleading factor here.
That it's a religious fight.
When you choose to be a Zionist, then you're a Zionist. I don't care about your religion anymore.
And for those who are, I mean, most of our audience is obviously American. There's so much support among American progressives, much like the governments in the Middle East. Not all Americans support the U.S. Giving Israel our tax money. So obviously we're not there on the ground with you, but how can Americans support Palestinians? There's boycott, divestment, sanctions, but what else is there?
There's the boycotting movement. There's going to the streets right in front of the Zionist embassies, trying to send a message. There are messages that should be delivered to the American administration to refuse using these tax monies to kill children, to kill women, to kill youth in Palestine, to kill people in Palestine in general. So people should stand against this continuing Nakba, this ongoing situation here in Palestine, because who's right is very obvious right now. If you look at the cause itself, you can see what's really happening, and we shouldn't keep our eyes closed anymore. The American community needs to see what's really happening. This is an eye-opening cause. This is what's happening right now is an eye-opening issue that can be spread around the world. So they have to march in the streets. They have to join all the statements that are coming from the occupied land in Palestine that demanding the liberation of prisoners, a right to return, uh, the liberation of Palestine in general, from the river to the sea, of course.
And actually, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you about. I know I've kept you very long, and I really
Oh, no.
appreciate your time. There's one last thing I wanted to ask you about that you guys have been dealing with over there, which is the issue of online censorship. I just want to note to those who are listening and watching, the former Director General of Israel's Justice Ministry, Amy Palmer, is actually on Facebook's oversight board now. And we know that Facebook has agreed to basically censor on Israel's behalf. So from where you are, what is that looking like? Are you guys seeing your Instagram and Facebook posts being censored? Because there's been a lot of reports about that.
We're being banned from posting anything on Instagram, on
Wow.
Facebook. Our accounts are being deleted. Hundreds of accounts and thousands of accounts are being banned. Hundreds of accounts are being deleted. The reach of the news sites is very low. It's not allowed to reach people anymore. So you have to search for the name of the page, of the news page you want to search, or you want to see the news on. So we're facing a huge war on the internet, and it's all censored, of course, because when you type a certain word about Palestine here, if you type the word Shaheed, murder, then your account is going to be banned.
Wow.
Yes. If you type certain names in Palestine, certain murderers' names here in Palestine, then your account is going to be banned. They're not only doing this, they're trying to attack any movement that is trying to spread the word. A couple months ago, Samidoun was listed on the terrorist list.
On whose terrorist list? Who's
the occupation terrorist list.
And Samidoun, just to tell people, it's like you're an organization that works mostly around prisoners' rights.
Yes, we're defending the prisoners and we're demanding the freedom of all the prisoners. So this is our work, and our work is very obvious. It's on our website, it's on our Facebook page, it's everywhere. And we were actually listed on that list. We think of it as an honor.
For Israel to call you a terrorist. Yeah. It means you're doing something right.
Because we're doing something right, because we're trying to do something around the world, not only in Palestine. We're trying to raise awareness about what's actually the prisoner movement is facing here in Palestine. And we were attacked this way. Benny Gantz has signed Samidoun on the terrorist list.
Benny Gantz, of course, is supposed to be the liberal. He's supposed to be the Israeli liberal politician.
Yeah, but he's the minister of war.
Yes. Yeah. And lastly, Sheikh Jarrah, I probably should have raised this earlier, but just to update people, the Israeli government has basically deferred the ruling on the evictions for another 30 days, I think. I think this seems to be like an effort to get people to kind of forget about it until they come back to it. But do you think that's going to happen? Like, do you think that'll work?
No, because they have triggered the bullet, and the bullet is now out. So people will stay in the street. They're trying now to control the situation because it went out of control, even to them. They were surprised by...
Oh, I love this is basically the noise of the West Bank. It's nice to give people to give people a feeling of being there.
Yes. So what this postponed came because of the international movement around the world.
They're agreeing with you. They're agreeing with you.
There's a car that is stuck in the street. Okay, now it's gone. Okay. We can continue. So this ban came in a situation where all the international communities started to speak about it, where they started to raise awareness about it. So things came out of their hand, and now they're trying to collect the whole subject, to collect the whole cause, and to keep it internal, to stop people from moving. But yeah, part of it is because of the statements that are coming out from Russia, from the States, from the fourth quarter, the international fourth quarter house. So this is what they're trying to do now, is just to collect the subject, and postponed it on to more to 30 days. But people actually said, okay, no, we're not leaving. And a lot of people yesterday night, when the decision came, went to Sheikh Jarrah to protest. And then hundreds of soldiers actually came to evacuate them
Mm-hmm.
by force yesterday.
I saw the videos of that. Thank you so much for coming on and breaking all this down for us. Can you tell
You're
people
welcome.
where they can find the work that you're doing for Samidoun and how they can follow along and support you guys?
You can follow us on samidoun.net. That's our website. We list all the actions that you can take in your communities and how you can participate and be part of this and to spread the truth and what's really happening in Palestine. You can also check our Facebook page, our Twitter page. It's all Samidoun the International Prisoner, Samidoun Palestinian Prisoners Network, International Palestinian Prisoners Network. You can follow all our work there, and you can follow all the calls to action that we have spread recently. And you can also join us from the 15th to 22nd of May on the week of struggle, the week of Palestinian struggle, because 15th of May marks the 73 years of Al-Nakba. So you can organize, march in the streets, send messages, and we can deliver it everywhere and spread it everywhere. So you can join us
Thank you so
with
much,
that.
Hadeel Shatara of Samidoun, talking to us from the West Bank. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you.